Alright, I'm recording. Hey gang, Andy here. And today is a very special day, yes, because today we'll be celebrating my 20th YouTube anniversary. So, apologies on being a few days late from the actual date, which was March 1st in the States, or March 2nd if you're in Japan. And yeah, you know how life is. Some IRL commitments that kind of delayed some things, but we're here now. And today we're going to be answering not 10, not 20, like I initially planned, but 100 questions about me, my life, and other things. So with that said, let's get into it. And I divided these questions into different eras or sections of my life. So the first one, the first era, I guess we'll say, would be the early years on my channel. So circa 2006 to 2010. So with that said, let's begin. Question 1. What was the very first thing you ever transferred from a VCD to your computer in your Urbana dorm? So, those who don't know, back in the early days, some of my very early videos were actually ripped from VCDs. So I would get the video footage from the CD and put it on my computer, and then I would upload that to this fun new little website called YouTube. So that way my friends and I could watch the videos wherever we were and wouldn't have to borrow the same VCD over and over again just to see that funny clip of Ben kicking that dude in the face. The first one that I ever transferred would probably be the first video that I ever put up, which was that short clip of my friend Ben kicking this dude in the face during a karate tournament. So there you go. Question number 2. If you could find that kid in 2006 ripping karate videos, what's the one piece of advice he'd actually listen to? Well, hard to say what he'd actually listen to advice-wise, but I would say to him to get your own camera as soon as possible, because it would be very advantageous for me to actually get onto the platform sooner than I did, because even though, yes, I am celebrating 20 years on the platform, but it wasn't until about 2.5 years later, on Labor Day 2008, when I got my very own camera and actually started making videos of my own much more consistently, but we'll be getting into that later. Question number 3. How did the small town energy of Saline, Ohio fuel your desire to see the world? Well, that's just kind of the nature of small towns, right? Once you grow up and get a bit older, you start to see just how small your small town is in comparison to the rest of the world, and you want to get out there and explore. And that was my mindset in my early 20s when I started on YouTube, was to get out and explore the world, especially maybe one day see Japan, but who knows if that'll happen, right? Question number 4. You mentioned Kurt Bell from the Softy Papa channel as a catalyst. What was the specific vibe of his channel that made you think, I can do this too? Well, it wasn't really that necessarily, but to give a little bit of context for you guys, I made a few vlogs just kind of being a bit down in the dumps that I couldn't go out and visit all the cool spots in Japan and whatnot, and was wondering like what types of videos I could be making. You know, I just had a couple vlogs talking about my life, but I was just kind of in a weird creative rut at the time and didn't really know what to do. And then Kurt from the Softy Papa channel commented on one of my videos and said, well, I mean, I'm living in Japan, but I've never been to Saline, Ohio before, so can you show me what there is to see? What is it like out there? I don't know. Show me. And so that kind of gave me a bit of motivation to think that, well, a Japan vlog is basically just a travel video anyway, right? So why not make a J-vlog style travel video in my hometown? And that's what started off the Life in Video series, which is the namesake of this channel, Andy, Life in Video. Question number 5. What was your very first camera setup and how did you manage storage before the cloud existed? Very good question. So my very first camera was the Sanyo Zacti CG6. I got it used off of eBay, and the reason I got it is because back in the early days of YouTube, the two main cameras YouTubers would get would be the flip cams, with the little flip out USB dongle, or the Sanyo Zacti cameras. I chose Team Zacti because I knew that Tokyo Kuni had a Sanyo Zacti camera, but I didn't have enough money to get his exact camera because his could record HD. So I got the CG6, which could only record SD or 480p. So I got it as something that I could use that was within my budget. And how I managed storage was the same way I manage storage even today, as I'm recording this video, is through SD cards. But at the time, I didn't have a whole lot of storage for those SD cards. The max that I had was a 512 megabyte card, not gigabyte, megabyte SD card at the time. And later on, I would upgrade from there, but that's basically what I was working with at the time. And one of the things that I did love about the Sanyo Zacti was the grip style, where you could just grip it into your hand. It would be the little pistol grip style, so it felt very comfortable to use. But unfortunately, the lens wasn't very wide angle, so even if I would have the camera like this far back, it would look like I was recording like this close. So those early Andy-san videos would be like, all right, and we're recording. Hey gang, Andy here. And today we're in Saline, Ohio. Wowee, isn't that exciting? So I'd be like way too close to the camera in those videos, even though my arm was like fully stretched out and would get very tired, like basically locking my elbow into place to make those videos. So that was the literal growing pains of the early days on my channel. So question number 6. Looking back at your band practice vlogs, do you see the same creative spark then that you have now? It's a different animal, really, but not all that different. When it comes to the band practice videos, when I would record them, I basically just did it to obviously record the band practice and to get close-ups and stuff like that and make the sound as good as I could, knowing what I knew at the time. As far as like adjusting volume levels and stuff like that. But it's a whole different animal doing my own vlogs like this one versus actually getting into the field outside and recording stuff. So it's slightly different recording philosophies, if you will. Question 7. Was there ever a plan B in 2006 if the Japan dream didn't work out? Well, before I got the idea that I could actually live in Japan versus just visit, my plans for work after graduating high school were to learn web design, because at the time, back in the early to mid 2000s, especially in the more rural parts of Ohio, a lot of companies didn't really have websites up on the internet at the time. Or if they did, it was either like placeholders, or even by early 2000s standards, the websites were wildly out of date. So my goal at the time was to learn web design so I could either work freelance to help build up websites for companies that either don't have websites or need them updated, or to get hired by a big company to upkeep their website full time. And that's why I first went to Aichi Technical Institute in Dayton, Ohio, after I graduated, and then later transferred over to Urbana University. So that was part of the early days of my college career, if you will. And now, feeling a bit old, but both of those schools have long closed down by now, so they're not even around. It's just wild to think about. Question number 8. How did your family react to you gabbing to a camera in the early days? Well, not to speak disparagingly of my family, of course, but a lot of folks at that time, including my family, didn't really know what to make of it. They just thought I was doing some silly, stupid thing, you know, because the concept of vlogging wasn't really a thing back then. So if I were to try to do this kind of stuff out in town, a lot of people would just kind of look at me funny, like, why are you talking to yourself, dude? Like, are you working for the government? Are you like a little in the head? You know, why are you talking to yourself to that little camcorder there, like, what are you doing, dude? So a lot of people were very like suspicious about my vlogging behavior, even though I largely kept to myself about it. I didn't really go out bragging that I was making videos on YouTube and stuff like that. I just kept that to myself largely, but you know, people find out. It's the blessing and curse of a small town, if you will. So question number 9, what is the oldest video on your channel that you still feel proud of today? There's a lot of like those very early YouTube videos that I still like, you know, whether it's the karate practice or the band practice videos, or even some of the early life and video videos. Yeah, I can still kind of look back at them and feel a little bit of nostalgia for times long since gone. You know, whether it's looking at, you know, my friends playing in a garage, really bringing that small town Ohio feel, or me gallivanting around Salina, trying to do my best like GoPro type stuff on my bicycle riding around town. Those all shaky and janky as all get out. But I was still, you know, trying something different and getting myself out there. And question number 10, the perfect 10. If you had to describe 2006 Andy in 3 words, what would they be? Work in progress, because at the time I was 20 years old, a very young adult, and didn't really know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be in this life. I was still figuring a lot of stuff out, and it would take me many more years to continue to figure those things out. All right, so that was era number 1. Let's move on to era number 2, the Navy years. So question number 11, talking about my life as a sonar tech, or STG. How does looking for pings in the ocean translate to looking for pacing in a video edit? Well, this is kind of fun because I actually look at the audio waveform a lot more than I do what's actually on video. So I would see if there's like a bit of a pause, the audio waveform would just go down. And then if there's like a big spike, I would know that there's like something going on there. And also discover like the pacing between the big spikes and stuff like that. So looking at that, I would know, okay, something's going on here, so I should probably focus on this spot. Or if there's not a whole lot going on, you know, waveform wise, then I know, okay, that's for B-roll. So I'll just, you know, get rid of the audio and just cut it up using B-roll and stuff like that. Whereas if there's a lot of, you know, audio going on, then I know, okay, somebody's talking. So question number 12, what was the scariest moment you had while stationed on either USS Kurtz or USS Lassen? To tell you the truth, we didn't really have a whole lot of like, oh shit moments on board. There was a couple where I remember one time on Lassen, there was a sonar part that got broken. Part of the sonar array got broken, and we had to pull into port early, just as we had gotten out underway. You know, everybody else got liberty except for us, who had to be still on the ship to help with repairing the array, at least to a point to where the contractors would take over and do the actual super in-depth type stuff. You know, but we had to still be there to like manage the array and do testing and all this other nonsense. So that was not really a scary moment, but definitely like oh shit, you know, these things can happen when you're on the sea turning and burning. Question number 13. You've been open about the Navy stress and drinking. How did the camera act as a sobriety check for you? It wasn't until much later that I really started to notice like how much the stress from the Navy was affecting me, and particularly my drinking. At the time, I didn't really see it as a problem. It was just the only way I could deal with just the huge amount of stress in my life, especially being in Japan. You know, you only have access to so many avenues to relieve that stress, and for me, it was drinking. So looking back on it, even though creatively speaking, I thought that time doing the Andy Japandy series and stuff like that, I was at like a creative peak for a lot of it. Looking back and just kind of seeing my demeanor tells a completely different story. All right, question number 14. What's the one thing about Yokosuka Navy life that vlogs can never truly capture? Well, unfortunately, unlike Kurtz, on Lassen, they were very cognizant about a lot of operations and stuff going on there. So there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't record that I really wanted to record, especially with my role as a sonar tech. A lot of what I did is largely classified or conducted in classified areas. So I couldn't just necessarily bring my camera down to sonar control and start filming, you know. that wouldn't have flown. But it would have been kind of fun to get like a little day in the life for me. Yeah, unfortunately, just due to the classified nature of my job, it wasn't possible. So question number 15. How did it feel to be the YouTube guy on a US Navy destroyer? Well, it's funny you mentioned this question, actually, because my experience on Kurtz as the YouTube guy versus Lassen as the YouTube guy were two completely different experiences. So some folks on the Kurtz managed to find my YouTube channel before I actually checked on board. And there's a couple guys that were like making fun of me for it because they thought I was just doing a bunch of cringe nonsense. But they still like kind of secretly liked it, but they would still kind of like razz me about it. You know, that sort of like bro style. But by the time I got to Lassen, people actually were a lot more encouraging of my YouTube activities. And there was a couple guys from Kurtz that moved over to Lassen with me. And I would hear in like the hallways sometime, Andy Japandy! Or the P-ways, I should say. I was like, oh, hey, what's going on, OS1? You know? So that was fun. But one thing I did during my Navy days that I'm still very proud of was I managed to follow the rules about social media and whatnot. And that's something, unfortunately, a lot of guys and gals who share their military experience while active duty, you see a lot of their channels get taken down because they're not completely following the rules of using social media. And so unfortunately their command gets involved and has them take their channel down, or private videos and all this other stuff. And it's a lot more looked at than it was back when I was doing it. But even when I was doing it, I always maintained that as long as I'm following the rules, not acting a fool out in town, representing the Navy and the U.S. to the best of my ability, it was all good. Question number 16. If you could go back to your berthing area on the ship, what's the one shot you wish you capture for the documentary? If it was in the berthing area, probably one of the things that I would love to have captured was on Kurtz, because on Lassen, the berthing area was just the berthing area. You'd have like racks, you'd have showers, toilets, stuff like that. But on Kurtz, you also had a rec room, or a little theater media room. So it would have like a big screen TV on one wall or bulkhead, and then you could either like play DVDs, or a lot of people would hook up like video game systems they'd bring along, like a PS2 or whatever, and stuff like that. So if I were to record something in the berthings in particular, it'd probably be just guys having fun in the media center. Question 17. Why did you decide to buy back your leave to get out of the service in 2015? Well, the truth is I didn't really have a choice in that. Because of the way I was getting out of service, I wasn't given the option to take what is called terminal leave. So basically, if you're getting out of service and you have leave days still on file, you can take what's called terminal leave, and instead of either staying on your ship or staying on some other holding command for the rest of your service days, you would be able to go home or do whatever, and then you would just ride that out until your last day, and that'd be that. But because of the way I was getting out was due to admin reasons, so I was getting administratively separated, I had to buy back my leave days instead of taking them like I would for terminal leave, which ended up helping me a little bit because I was able to get essentially half a check extra rather than just going on terminal leave. So that was nice, but it did require me to stay in Washington State a bit longer to out-process. Question 18. What was your final meal in Japan before heading back to the States in 2015? Oh, it's easy. It was curry rice at Narita Airport. I think I managed to get a picture of it on Instagram as well. But yeah, that was my traditional meal flying in and out of Narita at the time, was getting their little plate of curry rice and a beer. And yeah, that was my meal as well for the flight back. Question 19. Did you feel like a failure leaving Japan the first time, or did it feel like a mission accomplished? No, I didn't really feel like a failure, even though a lot of other people tried to make me feel like that. I felt like I was moving on to the next phase of my life, because at that point, with the Navy and all the stress and everything, I needed a change in my life. And given the opportunity to exit the Navy a few months earlier than my EOS, or end of active obligated service, allowed me to do that. And so I was looking at it as a new opportunity and a new adventure. And while I was sad to leave Japan to make that happen, I knew some way, somehow, I would make it back. And question 20. What is the biggest lesson the Navy taught you about discipline that helps you hit render today? Well, with my time in the service, in particular, it wasn't really an issue of discipline so much as it was building systems and establishing routines. Because, and this is kind of a big misconception about the military in general, is that, it'll help you build discipline, so you'll be a nice disciplined person. But really, it helps you build and establish routines. And where discipline and motivation can fail you, routines will not. Because once you get into the rhythm of a routine, it's hard to break it. So when motivation and all that fails you, you just fall back on your routines. And if you have a good established routine, then you're all good. So how routines fit into the context of videos is having a consistent format for these sorts of things. Like for my videos, if I was just doing like a vlog or something, even this video, it's, start with the intro, the whole writing and recording, hey gang, Andy here, and, do all that stuff. And then getting into talking about what we're talking about. If it was an update video, I would usually do YouTube news first because it's just a little quick blurb, and then get into the personal news later, because that usually takes longer. So I usually do that after the YouTube news. Then after I get that done, then we'll do the outro, the so yeah, all that stuff. Put the end card there after all that. And there you go. That's like most of the video already done before I made a single cut, basically. So as long as you have a good routine, a good format set up, that makes editing a lot simpler. All right, so that was Era 2. Let's move on to Era 3. Post-Navy life. From 2015 to 2019. Question 21. You were 32, living with your parents and working at McDonald's. What was the internal dialogue on those drives to work? So, to bring a little bit of context to the situation, at this time, I was 32, living with my parents, working at McDonald's part-time, because I was helping my folks to start up a business for doing real estate home tours for real estate listings. And unfortunately, it wasn't really going as planned. So I basically went from helping my folks to start up a family business to being, as the question said, 32, living with my folks and working part-time at McDonald's. So yeah, the situation wasn't good. So the internal dialogue basically was, I gotta get the fuck out of here. But I don't know how to do it. Because at that point, I dropped out of college twice, 3 times in total at that point, but twice post-Navy. And, I was thinking about how am I going to get back to college because this business isn't working out. Things are getting tense at home, and I just needed to find someplace else to stay. So that was my mindset at the time. And thankfully, I listened to a lot of future funk and city pop playlists that helped me get through those hard times. So shout out to all y'all. Okay, question 22. The Andrew incident. They make it sound so bad. So why does it cut so deep when managers at McDonald's refuse to call me Andy? So a little bit of context on this guy, because this is a deep cut, actually. So when I started working at McDonald's again, back in Ohio, I would get called Andrew by the managers, even after I'd say, oh, no, you can just call me Andy. It's fine. And so every time I would clock in, hello, Andrew, how are we today? It's just like, so it bothered me so much because I felt like they weren't listening to me at all. They didn't really see me for me. They just saw me as a number, and it was just like, it was just like another little stab of like, I don't belong here, but I still have to make do, but they're still not acknowledging me. It's just like, just can't be here. I'm not supposed to be here, basically. So question 23. How did your anxiety manifest during those high traffic fast food shifts? So at that particular McDonald's, unlike the other McDonald's I've worked in the past, where you'd have just a few people in the back, this one had a very full crew back in the grill area, the kitchen. And because of that, you pretty much only were relegated to like one job. And you were literally like shoulder to shoulder with everybody. So if I had to go like get buns, I couldn't do like a huge movement because I'd bump into like 2 or 3 people. So I had to like do like that, basically. And during a lunch or a supper rush, it would get really hectic, but I couldn't move. I couldn't do my usual thing because I was so crowded with a whole bunch of like younger kids and stuff. And I'm just like, we got to get things moving, but there's just like too many people in the kitchen, too many cooks in the kitchen. I'm just like, Jesus, man, let me do my thing. And so that would build up on my anxiety of the situation. And, post-Navy, I've been dealing with a lot of anxiety issues, and being in that environment surrounded by so many people in close proximity really triggers my anxiety. And so that's when I realized, okay, I really can't be doing this anymore. Not just, that I felt like I was above working at McDonald's at that point, but it was just, physically, mentally, I can't hang like I used to when I was younger. So I got to get out of here. Question 24. You called yourself a, quote, fucking failure in a 2018 vlog. What was the exact moment that feeling started to flip into persistence? I'd say once I actually found out that I could study in Japan on the GI Bill, because at the time I didn't really know of people studying overseas. I had heard about it, but I also wasn't given a whole lot of information about it. Like, from what I heard, you could study overseas, but the amount of money you would get would be very limited, and a lot of overseas universities aren't familiar with the GI Bill, so there would be a huge lack of VA support if you did decide to study overseas. So those were pretty big risks for me, so I decided, well, I'll just go study in America, get my degree, and then come back to Japan that way. But when I heard an old shipmate of mine had gotten out of the Navy and was going to school at Temple University, Japan, in Tokyo, I hit him up on Facebook. I was like, hey man, how you going into Temple? Like, what's that all about? And then he told me that because it's an American school, a satellite campus, he could go there just as easily as he could go to any other American university. And there'd be no difference in terms of how the GI Bill treats it and all that. So I was like, oh shoot, sign me up. And so I was looking around at other schools as well to see if they would accept me, because my GPA wasn't the best at the time. So I applied to Lakeland University, Japan, which is similar to Temple in that it's a satellite campus of a school in the States. And at the time, my GPA was too low to be accepted. But the dean said, if you improve your grades, then we'll reconsider. So that was the moment where I was like, okay, I have a shot at this, so why not go for it? And then, talked with my brother, see if I could stay with him in North Carolina, where he was stationed at the time, because he was in the Army, and lived with him and my sister-in-law as well, and stayed there for about a year and some change, going to school, rehabbing my GPA. Eventually got accepted out to Lakeland University, Japan, and, well, that's a whole nother era that we'll be getting into. And I probably spoiled it, but we'll see. But yeah, that was the moment that the feelings started to flip into, okay, bro, you gotta lock in. Question 25. During your time in Michigan, what was the darkest night where you almost deleted the channel? I had a lot of those, actually, because during my time in Michigan, that was like shortly post-Navy, I was going through a huge identity crisis at the time. I didn't really know who I was on YouTube anymore. If I couldn't be the Navy guy or the Japan guy, then what was I, just a guy? Who could I be on YouTube if I didn't have those marketing hooks, right? So it was during that time I was doing a lot of experimentation as far as different types of content on my channel and other channels as well, most notably the Let's Play channel, AndyCade, which got taken down by YouTube with no explanation. It was just gone one day. But doing stuff like that, doing some live streams, just trying a bunch of different things, doing car vlogs. I didn't really know who I was on YouTube anymore. If I couldn't be who, either the Navy guy or the Japan guy, then who was I? And so I had a lot of dark nights where I thought, just fuck it, let's just private everything, delete everything. I can't take it anymore. And I actually did, for a short time, private all my videos. I didn't delete anything though, thank God. But I did private all the videos briefly, because I was so sick and tired of it. Didn't know what the fuck to do. But fortunately, cooler heads prevailed, and I unprivated all the videos. Question 26. You were a 3-time college dropout. What made the 4th time, Lakeland, different? Because I had a goal, basically. With Urbana, I was a young adult. I didn't really know what I wanted to be in the world. I had an idea with being a web designer, but, in navigating that as a young adult without, my folks around to tell me what to do and all that kinds of stuff, it was difficult, and that first little taste of freedom got knocked back to reality, as it were, when my grades fell because I was more focused on hanging out with my friends and, just having a good time than actually going to class and doing the work. And even after the second semester, when I was given the go-ahead to try again, and then finances got in the way, that's when, I got depressed and thought, well, there's no point to any of this, right? There's no way I'll be able to get out of this mess. And that's when I dropped out the first time. Then the second time was post-Navy with Western Michigan University, where I initially went in there as a, was it what they call it, computer information systems major, because that was my old major when I was going to Urbana, so I figured I'll just pick that back up again, right? But, I found out I just didn't really jive with it. My skill sets weren't quite what the classes were lining up with, so I was like, okay, maybe if I switch majors, then I'll be able to continue going to class. So at that point, I was also doing freelance video editing, so I figured, well, it'd be nice to learn more skills about that so I could actually take video editing a lot more seriously and make better videos, right? So I switched over to film, video, and media studies. and that helped for a little bit. But I eventually did drop out, and so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go to the community college, Kalamazoo Valley Community College, because they had a digital arts program that focused on the Adobe Creative Suite. So I figured that was much more up my alley, and I'll just work on that and then eventually go back to Western to finish the degree. But unfortunately, I dropped out of that one too, which marked third time of dropping out in total. And I realized that the reason I was dropping out was because I had a lot of shit to work on upstairs, post-Navy. I went through a lot of, stuff during my time in the service. And even though I was out of the service, I didn't give myself enough time to process all of that. I figured, going to school, I would just focus on that. That would be my next goal. But I couldn't focus on it completely because of the stuff that's going on upstairs. And that led to anxiety issues, panic attacks, all that stuff. And I was so glad that I took a gap year to be with my folks to try to get that video production business off the ground. Even if it didn't come to be, it was still time for me to figure out what I really wanted to do moving forward, and gave me time to process my feelings. It was thanks to that when the opportunity to go back to Japan presented itself through Lakeland University, Japan, I was a lot more focused and more determined than ever to see this through. Because I knew if I didn't take this seriously, I would eventually run out of GI Bill benefits and there'd be no way for me to get my degree. So this was definitely a make or break type moment for me. And that was when I decided to take things seriously. Question 27. Why did you choose to vlog your panic attacks instead of hiding them? Well, I think I didn't vlog my panic attacks per se, but I vlogged about my panic attacks. I think the reason that I talked about them is because of a couple of reasons. One, I saw my vlogs as a means for me to process certain feelings. Just kind of a way of therapy, I guess, talk therapy for me. Confessional, if you will, is kind of how I saw it, as just a way for me to process my emotions and things. And me talking about stuff going on in my life was part of that. And panic attacks at the time were a huge part of it because that shit was happening a lot, especially shortly post-Navy. Because, like I said before, I hadn't fully processed what had happened to me during my time in service. And it wasn't like a particular incident happened that, it kept replaying. My time in service was, in a lot of ways, death by 1,000 cuts. So it was a lot of little things added up to just wear and tear and constant pressure to be on at all times. And just doing that for such a long amount of time really fucks with your nervous system. And so I needed time to process everything so that way I could continue on to the next step. But ultimately, the reason why I chose to vlog about the panic attacks instead of not talk about it is because, I want to be honest with you guys. And I feel that, my honesty is one of my best traits of my vlogs on YouTube. I'm not trying to produce a highlight reel of my best achievements. They are there, but I also want to talk about some times that I struggle, and I struggle a lot, And hopefully with me talking about my struggles, it'll help other people with their struggles as well. And it'll also help me to process my struggles too. So that's why I chose to vlog about that kind of stuff. Question 28. What does homeostasis mean to you, and why did you have to break it in 2019? I guess in this context, just having to break the homeostasis of continuing on college in America, I just knew that I had to make a big change. And like I said before, with the GI Bill, it was now or never, because I only had so much benefits to my name at the time that if I kept fucking around, I would run out of benefits. So it would be, very close to graduating, but I wouldn't have enough money or benefits to pay for those last credits. So it was definitely a, now's the time type situation. But in order to do that, I had to take a risk and break homeostasis. Question 29, the $600 move. If you hadn't moved to North Carolina to live with your brother, where do you think you'd be right now? Probably still in Japan, but had I not moved in with my brother in North Carolina, at the time I was also looking into some community colleges in the area as well. So even if I hadn't moved in with my brother, I still would have gone back to community college in some way to continue on with my degree and getting accepted into Lakeland University, Japan. So I think it would have continued, but the timeline might have been a little different with things. Question 30. What was the most Ohio thing you realized you missed while you were away and hated once you were back? That's a very interesting question, actually. I'd say just kind of the small town feel. It was, it's a blessing and a curse. Literally, when I moved back to Ohio, I had to put a lot of my stuff into a storage unit just because there wasn't enough space for me to put all that stuff in my folks' place. So I had to put a lot of it into a storage unit, and I'm not the most adept driving, especially with a towed thing in the back. So I was having just a heap of trouble trying to get my car with the trailer in the back out without the trailer turning too sharply. And so this one guy got out of his truck and he was like, "Hey man, can I get you out of there?" And he drove my truck out of it, so I was able to get out of the lot. And it's just one of those small town things. You wouldn't really see something like that in the big city. You just get people honking and telling you, "Get the fuck out of there, goddamn." But the whole thing with small towns is everybody's in everybody's business. So it's kind of pros and cons of things. The question 31, how did your brother help you rehab your mindset in North Carolina? I think just simply being out of my folks' place and their way of doing things really helped me a lot. Since, my brother is younger than me, he also had a younger mindset as well. So it was good to be around somebody who's a lot more future focused than my folks are, who just kind of want to keep things copacetic, if you will. Yeah, he was very supportive, my brother was, of me going back to Japan because he knew how much I missed it and loved my time there. So yeah, he was very supportive of me doing that. And so, I talked to him about, I talked to the dean of Lakeland and, we're going to be getting going with getting out there spring of 2020 and all this. And he's like, "Oh man, that's cool." Winter of 2020, I should say. That most of all really helped my mindset with getting things going, just having that freedom to actually pursue my goals rather than being told why that's a dumb idea and how I should just get a job. So question 32. What was the first goal you wrote on that North Carolina goal board? I didn't really have a goal board necessarily, but basically the main goal was to get accepted into a university in Japan. And so in order to do that, I had to rehab my GPA. So from there, I had to get accepted into community college in the area, take some classes that were in the major that I wanted to get into, which was business administration, and took classes that lined up with that, and just had the grind mindset, basically. Just, one class at a time, one day at a time, and just kept at it. And then had a pretty high GPA that first semester, sent my updated grades to the dean, he was very impressed and decided to give me a chance under probationary conditions, and just went on from there. So question 33. Did the life and video title come from a place of joy or a place of survival during those years? Referring to my post-Navy, pre-return to Japan years. So 2015 to 2019, basically. I'd say neither. Life in Video, or A Life in Video, as it was later called, was basically just to show my life in video, warts and all. So whether I was having a good time or a bad time, I was showing you guys my life in video. Question 34. How did you handle the haters or silent judgment from people back home during your 30s? That part was very difficult as well, because like I said, I got a lot of haters when I returned to America post-Navy, because I didn't exactly get out because I served my time in the service. I got out because, of weight issues. And even though I was, I think, 9 months away from getting out of the service, and I just saw it more as just early release, if you will. I saw it more as an opportunity to get to college faster, whereas they saw me as this big failure. It's like, oh, you spent your whole life working to get to Japan, you finally did it, and you're in the service, you made second class, that's E5 rank, and now you're throwing it all away to go to college, but you're 30, you're old, it's just people just don't get it, I even lost a couple of good friends because they couldn't get over the fact that I got out of the Navy because I was fat. Would send me all these nasty messages and stuff, and it just, it really hurt me, because a lot of those people were who I thought were close friends of mine at the time. But, that judgment really hurt me, and especially with my identity in flux at the time, it was very hard for me to handle that sort of stuff, And so question 35. What was the final straw that made you book that ticket back to Japan in 2020? Well, technically it was 2019, but it was the very end of 2019. There was no final straw moment. It's just, like I said, I already had everything planned out. I already contacted the dean with my updated transcript. He was very pleased at the improvement that I was making and decided to accept me into Lakeland University of Japan under probationary conditions. So I had to maintain a 2.0 GPA or above to continue going there. And so I was like, all right, cool, I'll be there. And so from then to the end of that year, 2019, I was still in classes for the community college. And I just did that to kind of grind some classes, get some extra GPA, get some other classes knocked out so I wouldn't have to stay as long at Lakeland, and continue on from there. And once I saved up enough money, got a lot of other stuff squared away, and got that ticket back to Japan at the tail end of 2019 to start school at the very beginning of 2020. So, yeah. All right, so moving on to Era Foa, and that is the return to Japan. That's going to cover 2020 to 2022. Question 36. You missed your flight and ended up in London. Did that feel like a sign to go home or a challenge to keep going? No, not at all. So, a little bit of context for those of you who may have forgotten about that time. I mean, it was 6 years ago at this point, so I don't blame you. But basically, my initial flight was to go from Raleigh, North Carolina to Montreal, Canada, to stay overnight and then fly out from Montreal to Tokyo, to Narita, I believe it was at the time. But by the time I got to the airport, that flight was already closed off. They had already stopped boarding and were getting ready to depart. So I talked with the lady at the ticket booth to see if I could get on another flight. And she was looking through and she's like, yeah, we can get you on another flight, but instead of going to Montreal, you'll be going to London. And you won't have to spend overnight. You just have like I believe it was a 5-hour layover, and then you would go to Tokyo. And I'm like, oh, sick, that's even better, awesome. So I saw it as an improvement, if anything, because I didn't have to worry about spending the night in Montreal, which is, for those who don't know, a largely French-speaking part of Canada, although it's not French, as you may know it, it's Québécois, which is a variant of French. So that's not exactly a language I'm quite familiar with, even though I have some personal history in Quebec, because my dad was actually adopted from Quebec back in the day. But no, I didn't see it as a sign to go home or a challenge to keep going. I just saw it as going from like calling my brother to like come pick me up again because we'll try to fly out again, to a much improved flight, because I would only get like a 5-hour layover versus having to find a hotel or something in a foreign country. So question 37. What was the very first smell of Japan that hit you when you landed in 2020? So I'd say my first smell that I noticed from landing in Japan was when I got into the trains. They have a very particular smell. I mean, it's kind of like, public transit, right? So it's, the cloth seats and all that. But yeah, that was the first smell that I noticed, to where I was like, okay, I'm actually here. I'm back. It's been over 4 years, but your boy is back. It feels good. Question 38. The Nakano Guest House. Yes, box life. What did living with international strangers teach you about your own Japanese-ness? I'd say when it comes to the Nakano Guest House in particular, living with international strangers, neighbors, or whatever, taught me to be more considerate of other people and to respect other people's cultures, not just my own or Japan's cultures, but it gave me a lot of perspective on things. So it was very interesting to live in that guest house in particular, because even though it was, for all intents and purposes, a ghetto capsule hotel where I lived in a box, basically like the same stuff that your dad would make a treehouse out of, that was the same building materials that I stayed in for about 5 months in total. But it was cheap, it was well within Tokyo, and it was a good commute to the school at the time. Then old Colonial Macaroni happened and caused me to reconsider that place. But the Nakano Guest House was my first step to getting started back in Japan, and it was a very pivotal step. So regardless, I really did appreciate my time there for that reason, if anything. Question 39. How did ground up hamburger meat shoulders from my luggage feel like a badge of honor? So, bring a little context to this one. I carried a lot of my stuff in a big black sea bag, and the shoulder straps on it weren't padded like the official military sea bags are. So they dug into my shoulders really badly, and basically when I went to go take a shower, I noticed it looked like strips of ground hamburger meat from where the straps had dug into. But yeah, I just kind of saw it as just, part of the process. A badge of honor, I guess, of you know what? I went through some shit, but we're here. We're finally here. Question 40. Why did you choose Lakeland University, Japan specifically for my GI Bill journey? Well, as I said before, initially I wanted to go to Temple University, Japan, but because at the time my GPA was so low, obviously they didn't accept me. They didn't have any other recourse for me other than just to send me on my way, ta-ta, basically. So I reached out to Lakeland University, Japan. They rejected me as well, but the dean said, if your grades improve, you can send us a updated transcript and we'll reconsider. And that's what I did, took them up on it. And that's when they brought me over under probationary conditions for that first semester. And yeah, that was my first step. And initially with Lakeland, at the time they only offered 2-year degrees. So the plan was for me to do my 2-year degree at Lakeland, then transfer over to Temple to finish out for my 4-year bachelor's degree. But when I reapplied to Temple with my updated transcripts, they still rejected me based on the cumulative GPA of all the different colleges that I went to. Even with my vastly improved grades currently at the time, they still didn't accept me. So I was in a bit of a tight spot at the time and didn't really know what to do. But fortunately, Lakeland reached out to me and asked me to be part of their bachelor's program that they were starting up. So I was so glad to be part of the pilot candidacy program for that. And later was the first student at LUJ to get my bachelor's. Number 1 with a bullet. And actually the first one to accept the award on stage. Question 41. What was the hardest subject for you to pass while living in that tiny guest room house? I'd probably say it wasn't because the class was difficult, but there was a lot of classes that required me to speak on the mic. And during this time, obviously, that was during Cloney Macaroni. So I had gone from being in in-person classes to doing stuff in Zoom rooms. For me, it was hard to focus because there was so much going on in the guest house, because a lot of other folks had their shifts and everything changed over. A lot of them were also doing online classes as well. So it was very hectic in that guest house. And at the time, I couldn't even go to like a restaurant or anything to sit down to get away from all that, because obviously, you know what was going on. So it was very difficult for me to find space for all that, especially when I had to speak and turn the mic on and like everybody else was like talking in the background. It's just, very hard. So I eventually had to find my own place, find my own private guest house, which I did in Kawasaki. So after 5 months of staying at the guest house in Nakano Shimbashi, I moved to a guest house with a private room in Kawasaki and was able to continue on my courses from there. So question 42. How did old Cloney Macaroni change my Return to Japan vlogs? It changed them very significantly because my initial plan when I got back to Japan was to kick off the Andy Japandi series again proper and actually go out and do all these cool video ideas that I had of different places I would visit, different foods I would try, and all kinds of stuff. But unfortunately, due to, those plans got kiboshed, basically. And I had to wait until much later to do those videos. And so the momentum on Andy Japandi was largely stalled because of stuff like that. And even my own enthusiasm of making Japan videos was stalled because of it, because I felt like even if I did try to make Japan videos during that time, I'd feel like, you're not respecting the safety of everything. So you're just like, basically waving in the face of like, I'm in Japan and you're not, type thing. Whereas I just wanted to show people Japan, I didn't really want to do it to like flex or anything. I just wanted to do it. But the old Koronsuke delayed my Andy Japandi series quite significantly. And it wasn't until a bit later to where I started getting back into the groove of things. The question 43. What did it feel like to be a 36-year-old in a sea of 19-year-old students? Well, it wasn't the first time. I'd been that old guy with a couple other colleges, so it wasn't really that much of a shock for me at the time. But what was different about how I was treated at Lakeland versus the other schools, even with the large age gap, was that there's a lot of folks from other parts of the world, it's not just Americans or Japanese folks. So they were still interested in my experiences and stuff. They didn't really see the age difference being that big of an issue. So I thought, well, that's pretty refreshing. They're like, well, we're all students, so, is what it is, right? So I was like, oh, cool. So that's when I stopped letting, age be such a hang up for me, hanging out with these other students. Question 44, the graduation speech. Who was the target audience in your head when you were talking about persistence? So, for a bit of context, I made a short little speech at the end of my graduation video where I said the persistence quote. And my target audience, while I was talking about that, was to anybody out there who has a dream that says that, it's too much. You're not able to do it for whatever reasons. You don't have enough money, you're not smart enough, you're not strong enough, you're too old, you're too young, you're too this, you're too that. Whatever the reason is. My target was for those people, as well as my younger self, who was told a lot of those things growing up that, I won't be able to achieve those dreams that I had, and I should just get a regular job, and just be a normal person, But my target was to those people to say, you know what, you can be a normal person, but you can still do extraordinary things. It just may take a little bit longer, which was the case for me. Question 45. Being the first in your family to graduate, did that change how your folks back in Ohio saw your little YouTube hobby? I think at that point, it wasn't so much the graduation that changed their mind about my YouTube hobby, as it were. They had actually had a change of heart about it during the video production days. So when they saw that I was actually making money from doing freelance video editing, and that I had skills that could help them build that business, that's when they had a change of heart about, me just making silly little vlogs in my room, to this being an actual, oh, you can actually earn money from this. Oh, this is an actual, thing. Wow. So that's when they really came around to me making YouTube videos. So now let's move on to Era of Fife. The Chigasaki and Shonan life era. So from 2023 to now, 2026. Question 46. Why Chigasaki? What about the Southern Beach vibe called you over from Kawasaki? Well, it all started really back in, I would say 2022, before I graduated. I would visit my friend Eric. We know him as Eric Surf 6. I'll visit him in the Shonan area and would hang out with his friend Mike, who later became my friend, Mike from the Chill Japan channel. And in hanging out with those guys in particular, it showed me that the Shonan area, which I had only really considered to be like a summer destination, right? Because you go to the beaches and stuff and hang out in the summer. But beyond that, who cares? At least that's what I thought of at the time. But seeing them have such a rich life in this area beyond just the summertime showed me that there's a lot more to this area than just beaches and fun times, So that's what gave me the idea that instead of just visiting here during the summer, I could actually live here. And just the overall vibe of being around the ocean, because I grew up around freshwater, mind you, around lakes and stuff like that. I was always around a huge body of water of some kind. And I really missed that, being in Tokyo and Kawasaki later. But being in Shonan reminded me of all that, and I felt like a huge wave of calm whenever I was in that area. So I knew I wanted to move there somehow, some way, but I just didn't know how to make it happen at the time. And I figured it really wouldn't be practical to do while I was in school, so it'll probably be something that I'll have to tackle once I graduate and have my degree and can get a job, and then just either live there or be within commuting distance to there, something. But as you guys know, eventually, to make a long story short, I found work out this way, and it was due to that I was able to finally move to Shonan, here in Chigasaki to be specific, and I've been here ever since. Question 47. You live a 10-minute walk from the beach, but a 22-minute walk from the station. How does that walk shape your day? Well, it's quite significant, actually, because most people in Chigasaki, at least if you want to live a convenient life here, you would live north of the station, whereas I live very much south of the station. So I have a bit of an inconvenient life in that way because I'm so far away from a lot of the stores and convenience stores and things like that. So it is a bit more of a trek for me to go out and do stuff, get stuff, versus if I live north of the station where there's more options and things. But I just love the vibe. The closer I am to the beach, it's just a lot more relaxed. Things are much more spread out. So I feel a lot less claustrophobic in this part of town. But that being said, getting from here to the station and back is definitely a trek, and you just got to do it, man. You just got to do it. Although I will say podcasts and music definitely help, for sure. Question 48. What is your Chigasaki morning routine when you're feeling high vigor? My basic Chigasaki morning routine is getting up and going to my fridge to get breakfast started. Usually the night before, I buy some stuff from the conveni or the store that I can make day of, so it doesn't take me much time to prepare things. So it's just easier for me to put stuff together when my brain isn't at 100% when I just roll out of bed. So usually I get either like a Monster or a couple of coffees to kind of get the brain going, and then some sandwiches and things for the solids to eat. My stomach is a little so-so in the mornings, so I can't have like a whole lot of food, but I try to keep the foods fairly tummy friendly, if you will, in the mornings at least. And that's my basic morning routine. Nothing too special, really. Question 49. Do you ever take your camera to Eboshi and just sit there without filming? Truth be told, I've never actually been to Eboshi, which is the big rock formation at Southern Beach. It's one of the iconic landmarks of Chigasaki. There are ferries that go out that way, so people can go and like take pictures and stuff of Eboshi-iwa, which is the full name of the islands, or the little mini islands, structures, stones, however it may be phrased. But there are ferries that go out that way so people can take pictures and stuff. I have yet to take the ferry out there, but it is something I am looking into, so that way I can do that and maybe make an Annie Japani video as well as the photos. And now for question 50. We're halfway there. Whoa! How has your relationship with the local Japanese community in Kanagawa evolved? So, this is another lovely reason why I love living in the Shonan area, because in other parts of Kanagawa, like Yokosuka and Kawasaki, I didn't really feel like I was a part of the community. I just felt like I existed there for the most part. Whereas in Chigasaki, I actually feel like a person in Chigasaki, you know? I feel like I can contribute positively to this community. It's just, maybe it's the smaller town vibes, the more relaxed surfer vibes here versus the other places in Kanagawa that I've lived. But I actually feel like a resident here versus just somebody who exists like I did in the other spots. So I think that's a really big difference. And plus, I just really love the area, so I'm always game to tell other people about what I like about Chigasaki. Question 51. What's the best hidden gem food spot in Chigasaki that you haven't vlogged yet? So, technically I have, but it wasn't for my channel. It was for Eric Surf 6's channel. And that hidden gem food spot has got to be Frequency. Right there on Southern Beach. It is a legendary burger spot. has all kinds of burgers, all kinds of different toppings. They differ from season to season mostly, but the food there is a little pricey. You're looking at more like the 2,000, maybe 3,000 yen range for a burger set. But I will say the quality is definitely up there. It's definitely worth it. And to be right next to the ocean, if you're lucky enough to get one of the seats that has the ocean view, even better. But have your burgers right by the beach, what more can I say? Definitely check it out. Frequency Cafe Bar in Chigasaki. Question 52. Does the ocean air actually help with the claustrophobia you felt in Ohio and Tokyo? Now, I did talk about this earlier, and actually, yes, it does help me a lot. Tremendously, actually, with getting rid of that social anxiety and that claustrophobia. So I think that's another huge reason why I'm doing my best to stay in the Shonan area, specifically Chigasaki, but Shonan, most definitely staying in this area as best I can, because, just feeling the open air, the ocean breeze, and just everything being a bit more spread out than usual for a Japanese city just really helps put me at ease, more so than when I'm in the big city and surrounded by cars and tons of people walking every which way and bicycles, and all this, that, and the other, and it's just so hard to deal with that for me these days. Question 53. If you could move your desk to the beach, would you, or do you need the editing cave? As nice as that would be, just thinking about the concept of it sounds nice, but in actual practice, it's very much a nightmare situation, especially for electronics. Just having, that salty ocean air and the sand and all those kinds of stuff, possibly getting into the computer and everything and futzing it up. Not a good situation to be in, Although it does have this romantic connotation of, you got the beach going and you're just sitting there editing a video. Yeah, pretty cool. But in reality, not so much. So yes, I definitely do need a dedicated editing setup. But in addition to environmental reasons, another reason is I definitely need my own space to process editing and everything, because I feel like if I'm in an open area, even if it's not by the ocean, if it's, say, at like McDonald's or Starbucks or some other cafe, I feel like I can't truly get into my editing groove if I'm surrounded by people. I need that enclosure, that safe space, if you will, to really get into my editing groove. So yes, I do need the editing cave, very much. So question 54, how does the Chigasaki sunset compare to a sunset over the Pacific on a Navy ship? Well, it's the same sun, on the same ocean, in fact, but the vibes are much different. So obviously, if you're on a Navy ship, you get to see the sunset. It's a wonderful thing. You're just surrounded all sides by water. You just see the sun going down. It's a beautiful thing, but I really like the vibes in Chigasaki during the sunset because there's a lot of other things that you can look at in addition to the sun. You can see the other mountains. You can see Mount Fuji off in the distance. You can see, the sun setting on the waves and stuff like that as well, whether it's in Chigasaki or elsewhere in the Pacific. But I do have a soft spot for Chigasaki, of course. And question 55. Is Shonan the final destination or just another chapter in your life? So, as far as moving and living and stuff like that, to be honest, since moving to Chigasaki, I have not had any feeling of moving anywhere else. Something about me is, since I became an adult, I've always had this feeling that I needed to move to be somewhere else. That I couldn't stay somewhere for too long because I'd feel like I'd get stuck there, right? But Chigasaki is the first place in my adult life that I've lived at that I feel like, you know what? I'm cool being here. I don't mind setting up roots and really investing myself in this community versus, leaving to go somewhere else. Now, obviously, life gonna life. So if it does happen, it happens. But I have no plans on moving outside of the Shonan area, certainly, and would love to invest more into this place, ideally staying in Chigasaki. And so now we're moving on to Era 6, which is less about a chronological time and more about the craft of editing. So we're going to talk more about that as well as my Edit with Andy channel. So starting off with question 56, the big switch. Why did you finally decide to ditch Sony Vegas for Premiere Pro? So for those who don't know, my first editing program of note is Sony Vegas Pro, and I used it for many, many years until I got out of the Navy. And when I was accepted into a university, I was given a student discount for the Adobe Creative Cloud. And so I decided with this discount, I will finally learn Premiere Pro, because at that point I knew Sony Vegas and that was pretty much it. I didn't really have much other knowledge of other programs, but like if I was going to take editing seriously, in my mind at the time, I had to learn either Premiere Pro or Final Cut. And I didn't have a Mac, so Premiere it was. And since it came with the Creative Cloud and I had a huge discount with it, I figure, why not? And that's basically what made me do the switch. But it was very hard for me to get the hang of things. And even with the key commands, there's still some carryover from my Sony Vegas days. So, fun fact, when I cut these videos up, I still have the S key as my cut tool, or splice, on Sony Vegas. So even after all these years, old habits die hard. Question 57. What is your top secret editing trick for making a boring walk look cinematic? Looking at the motions, looking at the flow of the scene. So if you're looking at different motions, whether it's the camera like swooping in, or if somebody's like doing an action or whatever, you have to look at the beginning of the action. Like if I'm like hitting a baseball or something, I have to get to the point where he's like loose, tense, and then actually going for it, crack, and then release, and then, cut at the very end of the arc, and then cut to the baseball flying overhead, and then things like that. So you look for just the beats based on action and anticipation from the previous scene. So that's my little top secret editing hack, the worth of all time, baby. Question 58. How do you handle burnout when you have 3 different channels to feed? In short, not well. As you guys know, I've gone through so much freaking burnout from time to time with my YouTube videos and in editing for multiple channels, not just my own. I guess some of the best ways I've done to manage that is to spread out the workload. Because, some days are days where I feel energetic for filming. Other days are more low energy, more upkeep, more maintenance, back end type stuff, dealing with descriptions, thumbnails, research, whatever. Then there's other days where I'm in like the editing mode and I just get into it that way. And knowing what your body is feeling, respecting it, and if it's just not in a good place to put anything together, then you just need to respect that. Because you'll eventually get the energy back, but if it's not a go today, then just give it some time, step away, go do something else, and then eventually you'll be able to come back to it. So question 59. Why is separating church and state, if you will, or tutorials versus vlogs, my golden rule? So the reason why I decided to split the video editing tutorials from my personal vlogs is because it's just wildly different audiences. And I realized that the people who would tune into my vlogs wouldn't necessarily tune into my tutorials, and vice versa. But there was some crossover, but not enough to warrant putting both on the same channel. So I decided to have the Edit with Andy channel be its own dedicated thing, and then Andy Life and Video be more of my own personal type stuff, you know. And I feel like having that separation from church and state, if you will, be a good way to manage those audiences' expectations. So question 60. What's the most expensive editing mistake you've ever made? There's been a few. I'd say there was one video that almost got completely lost because the timeline was corrupt, I believe. So I was just about finished with this huge editing project and was getting back into it, but couldn't find the timeline. And so I was just like freaking out. I'm like, oh shoot, did I lose like all my progress and everything? And this is when I was first getting into Premiere, so I didn't know all the fun little fancy stuff Premiere could do versus Sony Vegas. So I was just thinking like, oh geez, did I lose all my progress? I didn't save a backup. This is terrible. But I eventually found that Premiere has this thing where it autosaves. So thankfully I was able to find an older iteration of the project and only had to backtrack like a little bit to get back to where I was, and was able to finish the project that way. So thank God for that. So question 61. How do you stay updated on video tech while living a simple life in Chigasaki? I just follow a lot of tech channels, and you know, my friends, they're real gearheads when it comes to the new equipment and stuff like that. So they also keep me in the loop with what's coming up in the video tech world. Question 62. Does AI in video editing excite you or scare you? I think for the most part, it excites me because it offers a lot of new creative expression and new ways to optimize my workflow. Like, to be honest, I actually use some AI assist in Premiere to help speed up my workflow. So Premiere has this thing where it can like auto cut silences and cut out filler words like and, you know, stuff like that. So it can automatically cut that, whereas before I would have to go in and manually cut all that stuff. Premiere can just do it automatically if you just set the parameters right. So that part is really exciting. But in terms of, say, like generative AI, it has gotten a lot better in quality very recently. You know, it's a far cry from the Will Smith eating spaghetti days, if you know, you know. So it can be exciting just seeing like the new developments, but also as, you know, a freelance video editor in my own right, it does kind of scare me because, you know, what if somebody decides to not hire me because, you know, well, they'll just edit the video in AI, you know, they don't have to hire a person to do it anymore. But on the other hand, I think the idea of having content put together by humans rather than just the AI slop that you see nowadays is there's going to be a lot more of a premium factor with that involved versus just standard AI slop. So I think it'll be a way for me to kind of step up my game and to make the content feel, you know, more human, I guess, more organic, if you will, versus, you know, crisp cut and everything like that, like what AI can do. So that's just kind of how I see AI in video editing moving forward. Question 63. What is the Andy signature in an edit? The one thing that tells a viewer, Andy made this. Gosh, that is a good question, actually. There's a lot of things that like I would think would be a signature of mine. Just like how I cut and stylize things. And then like some of the recurring edits that I have for some things. But I don't know. It's just, I don't know if that's a question for me to answer necessarily. So let me know what you guys think is an Andy signature. So if you watch a video either on my channel or someone else's channel that I put together, what is like a thing that can tell you guys, oh, Andy edited this? Because I'd like to know. Question 64. How do you organize 20 years of hard drives without losing your mind? Good question. I'd like to know as well. But no, seriously, a lot of the content over the years, I pretty much have mostly just the finished video files. I don't have the raw content as much as I used to. I had to, over the years, get rid of the raw content to make room for the finished videos. So I still have the finished videos on my hard drives for safekeeping, just in case something happens. But yeah, just keeping things organized, is definitely helpful. Just organizing it by year, organizing it by series, things like that. Just basic stuff, but you just have to do it, But once it's done, it's fairly easy to maintain. So that's the hard part, is just to do it, but to maintain it, much easier. Okay, question 65. What's the best piece of budget gear you still use today? I would say it is, if I can tilt the camera down, this guy. Not the mic, but the little puffball on top. This is a windscreen that I got from one of my former mics, the Zoom H2N. This is a nice little add-on that I bought for it, and I managed to keep it over the years to help with the plosives and whatnot for my at-home setup nowadays. Question 66. Why do you prefer barfing out ideas over strictly scripting content? Well, mostly just because it's easier for me to remember. If I were to try to remember a script, it wouldn't come out quite as right. Although I have found that doing voiceover, having a script definitely helps. But if I were to do something on screen, I'd be more focused on reading the screen than actually looking presentable. I'd just be kind of doing this the whole time and okay, cool. So it wouldn't really work for me on camera. That's just not how I operate. But doing voiceover, I can just, sit there with the mic, kind of read the thing, but focus more on my intonation and my delivery. So it's just easier for me to do that. So I would basically, what I would do if I were to make like a vlog or whatever, is I would have a basic core idea and would just have what I would call a skeleton script. So I would have the core idea of the thing I want to talk about, other little details of that thing, next thing, and then little details, and just basically just bullet points of stuff that I want to get in. And then once I have the idea of the topic in my head, then I can just go for it. And when I feel like I've kind of reached the end of this idea, then I can just look at the next list item on there and just go, oh, okay, moving on to this next thing, and just keep the video flowing from there. So that's how I deal with it. So it's not strictly off the top of my head. I do have some bullet point ideas for even the most off-the-cuff type vlogs. So question 67. How much time do you spend on a thumbnail versus the actual video? Not that much time, actually. Thumbnails are, unfortunately, I say, because I do really like doing photography, but I feel like a lot of time that I spend on the thumbnail is much of an afterthought, really. There's even videos where I don't even do the thumbnail at all. Like my most recent vlog, I didn't even bother doing the thumbnail. I just wanted to get the damn thing out there. But the vlog before it, I put together something using an old picture of the Sajicho Festival with me just doing like the whole thing for the thumbnail. I just found like a funny screen cap. That's usually what I do. I don't even do like, hey, let's pose for the thumbnail. I usually just pick out, usually like a frame early in the video, or I'm like at the most energetic. Because like as time goes on for the videos, I start to get a little more brr, 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 brr. But at the beginning of the video, I'm the most energetic. So I usually pick a frame from that point. Like if I'm doing like a or something, I'll pick it out. And then just, cut out the background, put a new background in there, add some text maybe, and just go from there. So there's not really much thought, to be honest, put into my thumbnails versus the videos, which depending on the video, if it's just a vlog, I don't take too much time with it. But if it's more like an Andy Japandy type video where I feel like the editing needs to be a step up, then that can take much longer. So question 68. What's the render sound that makes you the happiest? Probably actually clicking it to export to the Adobe Media Encoder. That's just a nice little like, finally, little moment. Or it's not really a sound necessarily, but maybe right after I send it to the Media Encoder, if it's a video for somebody else, hitting them up on PayPal, putting that invoice out there and just, that can be pretty satisfying as well. Question 69. If you could only use one lens for the rest of your life, which one is it? Oh, shoot. That's super easy, actually. The one lens that I have used before, not counting any newer lenses or anything like that, but the one lens that I have used, that if I only could use that lens for the rest of my life, what would it be? Easy. The Tamron 28-200 that I had for my Sony a7C. That lens is so multi-purpose, it's ridiculous. The only gripe I have about it is that it's a 28 instead of a 25, which they have made a 25-200 version, so it's a bit wider, so it's more apt for vlogging as well as telephoto stuff. But you do lose a little bit of aperture, a little bit of light bringing in, as well as background blur. So it goes from f2.8 from the 28-200 to f3.5 for the 25-200. So you do lose a little bit of light and background blur, but you do gain a bit of wideness in the angle. So it just depends on what you value more, really. But since I personally haven't used the 25-200 at the time of this recording, and I've only used the 28-200, if I had to pick any lens that I've ever used and just use that for the rest of my life, that's the one, Bo. Question 70. How do you balance life and video with actually living the life? That's a pretty good question, actually. So how do I balance, making vlogs about my life and video versus actually living my life? Just knowing like what constitutes, something that would make a good video versus something where I think it should be experienced without cameras and things. Just having that balance really helps. Just knowing and going out and experiencing things for the first time off camera really allows you to be in the moment versus vlogging about the moment. So it becomes a lot less performative and a lot less, okay, I got to make a good movie, and just allows you just as a person to focus on the activity. So a lot of times what I do for videos, like especially if it's like an Andy Japandy video, is I usually, go out to those places beforehand and kind of scout the area so I know what to expect. Or at least do a lot of research online so I know what to expect. And that way, when I'm actually there, it's much more controlled and I know what to look for. And then, having those moments of, okay, in this moment, I'm just going to be in like, vlogger mode, filmmaker mode, and just get like the nice B-roll shots and talk about the stuff. And then turn the camera off and then actually experience it. So that's just how I process living my life versus putting my life in video. All right, now we're moving on to Era 7, branding and identity. Question 71, the book. Where did the physical lens poke actually originate? So the coming at you book came from when I got my first GoPro, actually, because the angle is so wide and you get such a wide field of view. If you were to bring something closer to the lens, the object would look like almost 3D kind of. And so it reminded me, this is really a throwback, but it reminded me of back in the 90s, there was a lot of shows that would have like a 3D episode where they would send out these like 3D glasses that you could put on. And for that one episode, there would be like little moments where, okay, put on the 3D glasses. And you'll see somebody like reach their hand out like, whoa, or something. And the moment that it reminded me of was the 3D episode of Home Improvement with Tim Allen. And he had like a 2x4 and he would just like kind of like put it closer to the camera, like, whoa, whoa. And so just me like kind of reaching out, the coming at you. Because I used to do like coming at you, but since, the camera seemed to be so far away, I couldn't just do it like that. As for the coming at you with the new video of something, I had to like come at you and like bring the finger closer so it looked more in perspective. And then I realized because the field of view and everything is so skewed, fuck it, we're just gonna go all the way and just like zoom in really far so it looks almost like 3D. So it's like coming at you, book, with a brand new vlog or whatever I was doing, So that just eventually grew into that, and I ended up doing it even on non-GoPro cameras. And so question 72, for the sign-off pop noise, is that a habit or a trademark? Much like the pook, it was just something that I did, because with the intro and outro, they're relatively the same. So I would add little things into them to kind of add a little bit of variety, kind of shake things up and whatnot. And so the little pop, instead of doing like the "we'll see you" pook, which I used to do, because I do the pook in the beginning, and I figured if I did the pook in the beginning and the pook at the end, it'd be kind of samey, right? So I just kept the pook at the beginning and did the pop at the end to signify, okay, something's over, like it's popped, it's done, it's like, So it just kind of came about, just one of those things that I just did that stuck and incorporated into my signature outro. Question 73. Why Vliggity Vlog? What's the story behind the name? It was just, again, something that I would say, because you do so many of these vlogs, you have to at least for me, I have to change it up a little bit just to make it interesting, because I can't just go and say, all right, and we are recording. Hey gang, Andy here, welcoming you to a brand new vlog. It's just like, trying to do that 400 times is, it gets boring after a while. So you gotta zhuzh it up, So I add little things, like the pook and the pop and the vliggity vlog, just make things interesting. So that way it's not too samey for the intros and outros, and just kind of keeps me interested behind it. And I think for the particular phrase vliggity vlog, I think that might come from CTFXC, Charles Trippy. He was one of the first vloggers that I ever watched way back in the day. So even before CTFXC, back in early Charles Trippy type stuff on YouTube. I believe that might have came from him, if not somebody of that time frame. So Vliggity Vlog has always been around for a long freaking time. And again, it was just something that was in the back of my head. I just decided to pull out one day. Here we go, brand new Vliggity Vlog. Even the hand motions is just, something I do just to make things interesting. Question 74. How do you define new vigor? Well, I'd say since quitting my full-time job at the beginning of the year, it gave me a new lease on life, if you will, a new vigor, as the question says, and has given me enough headspace to focus my energies on stuff that I used to focus on, like editing more videos, more photos, getting myself out more, outside more, and even getting back into playing guitar. which I just purchased a used guitar not too long ago that I've been practicing on. Question 75. Do you ever feel trapped by your 20-year branding? Sometimes, actually, because I have so much legacy built up with my channel and the kind of stuff that I've done over the years. There are times where I feel kind of trapped by that, and that I can't do certain things because I feel like it would alienate my audience. But I also don't feel strongly enough about that type of content to like make it its own channel and its own thing. A good example of that actually was a short-lived little comedy series I did called Mr. Peachy, which I know a lot of you guys actually liked, but I think a lot of other people on my channel didn't really like. Kind of was what it was, but it was a nice, fun little experiment for me, if anything. Yeah, I just think, my community is already established with the types of videos it likes. I had to tread carefully with certain things and not affect the bread and butter of the channel too much, if you will. So question 76. What does the boopity boops mean to the community? Boopity boops meaning, description down below in the boopity boops. It's just, me showing you like, hey, if you want to check something out, like a link or whatever, it's down below in the description, down in the boopity boops. Again, like with, the pook and all that stuff, it's just something I would say. I think I might have got that from another vlogger or one of my friends, maybe. Just something I incorporated into my own lexicon here on YouTube. Question 77. If Andrew is the 9-to-5 guy and Andy is the creator, who is the guy that sits on the beach? Well, truth be told, they're all Andy. That's the thing. And that's the reason why I incorporated my name in all my channels. Is that at the end of the day, it's still me. Whether it's Andy Life and Video, Edit with Andy, Andy Japandy, Andy Cade, for 28 of you who know what that channel was, it's all me at the end of the day. And I always wanted to incorporate my own name into my channel and my online presence, because I knew if I were to meet people out in real life that were familiar with my channel, they would just call me Andy. Like, hey Andy, what's up, man? How you doing? And just make it simple. Question 78. How has your on-camera persona changed from 2006 to 2026? It's changed a lot. Like I said, I've incorporated a lot more my own personality into my speech. There's still a lot of things that I still can't quite get over, like when to look at the camera. There's times where I'm thinking and I have to look down. So that part kind of pisses me off a little bit, that I'm not constantly looking in the camera, because I'm always looking off to the side. Am I looking off to the script? Am I looking at the little monitor there? Am I looking at the mic? This thing's too bright. I got to look down. There's a lot of stuff, that I wish I could get out of the habit of doing, even after 2 decades of doing this whole thing. But as far as the overall persona, I don't think it's so much the persona as it's just me. I feel like I've changed a lot in these past 20 years. And you can go back and look at the videos that I was in and the videos that I made from that time frame to the videos that I'm making now. And hopefully you can see that difference. Question 79. What's the weirdest Andyism that you caught yourself saying in real life? Probably old cloney macaroni. That's another one for the COVID-19 pandemic. That was something that I picked up saying. Also, koronsuke. That was something that I picked up from the students over at Lakeland. That's what they would call it, is koronsuke. So I would say that sometimes, or cloney macaroni, or Kelowna-chan World Tour. So I would flip the R's and the L's, because I was afraid the subtitles would catch it and it would flag the video for that. So that's why I changed the wording for that. And there was times, I think one of the weirdest times I caught myself was I was actually talking with some YouTubers about that, and I did the little circle motion for the you-know-what, and they're like, the what? I was like, oh shit, the and I would say the thing. So that was probably the weirdest Andyism I caught myself saying IRL or doing IRL. So question 80. Do you consider your channel a documentary, a vlog, or a tutorial hub? Yes. No, I'd say when it comes to Andy Life and Video, it's definitely not a tutorial hub. That's Edit with Andy. We'll just keep all that stuff over there. But as far as like documentary or vlogs and stuff, it's definitely more vlog than documentary. But I guess if you were to take the channel in as a whole, you could consider it a documentary of sorts. You know, just considering the longevity of this channel and how much I've gone through in this period of my life online. That could be a documentary all of its own, really. But yeah, I would say if I had to pick a theme for this channel, it would be vlog. So now we move on to Era 8, talking about resilience and mental health. Yay! Question 81. You've been open about burnout this year, 2026, the big 26. What's the first step to recovery? So, I haven't only been open about burnout this year, but I've been open about burnout a lot of years. I'd say the first step to recovery is to listen to your body. There's a lot of stuff that I can't do that I used to be able to do in my 30s and in my 20s as well. So being in tune with your own body definitely helps. So knowing if you need to take a break, take that break and don't feel bad about it. Just know that you'll eventually get back to it, but you need to focus on recovery first. And then only through recovery can you healthily get back to making videos or doing other stuff. You know, just having your brain focus on something else definitely helps with coming up with new ideas or having a new vigor, if you will, to finishing other stuff. So yeah, just first step, listen to your body. Question 82. How do you stay optimistic when a job hunt in Japan gets tough? Well, a lot of that comes down to timing. So fortunately for me, this is the main hiring season in Japan, is the winter leading into spring. So around February, March of the year is when a lot of companies begin their hiring process for new recruits. And this is prime time for finding new work. So I know that even if I don't get one job or get ghosted by a job, I know that there's plenty of others out there looking for candidates such as myself. So just got to keep plugging on, basically. Question 83. What is the Andy method for dealing with a panic attack while the camera is rolling? Fortunately for me, I never had a panic attack while the camera was rolling. There's been a couple of moments where I've kind of messed up with the timing of things and was not like panic attack, but I was still kind of like, you know, shit, what I do, what I say, you know, that stuff is amplified even when I'm on stream where it's live and versus here where I can just cut out a lot of the nonsense filler stuff or retake, if you will. But never had a panic attack on camera. But the first step in dealing with something like that is to breathe. To focus on breathing, focus on 5 things in the room that you can touch using different calming techniques. Kind of helps me with grounding myself and getting back into a sense of normalcy. Question 84. Does the 20-year milestone feel like a weight or a springboard? I think in some ways it feels like both, you know, like with such a long time of having done content, you know, there is a lot of legacy that I have. And like I said earlier, sometimes it can feel like it's kind of weighing me down in some instances because it feels like I can't, you know, work on certain other types of content that I may have a slight interest in, just to like try it out. But on the other hand, having 20-year legacy on YouTube also gives me a bit of legitimacy with the platform and shows that, you know, I'm not just some guy that's just started up a YouTube channel two weeks ago. You know, I've been here a while. You know, I've seen a lot of trends and people come and go on the platform, but I'm still here. So in a lot of ways, you know, I feel like an elder statesman of YouTube, you know, and so there's some weight not just in holding me down, but weight as in significance to what I have to say, even if I don't have a huge audience or anything like that. Question 85. How do you handle the low energy vibes without letting them ruin the channel? Used to be back in the day, even when my energy was low, I would still put myself on camera because I wanted to make videos consistently. But I found that even if I did that, while the videos were more consistent, I just felt like the overall quality suffered, and it gave people the wrong impression of me, because they would see, you know, I'm happy in one video and like sad and depressing in the next 2 or 3. And so they'd be like, okay, so who is this guy really, you know? So these days, if I'm just not feeling it and have like low energy, then I focus on other things besides being on camera. So, like I said earlier, you know, just listening to your body, knowing where your energy levels are at. If you feel like you can be presentable on camera, do that. If you feel like your energy levels are pretty low and you're just kind of then maybe doing more back-end type stuff will be better. But if your energy levels are kind of in the middle, then editing would be a good choice. Question 86. What's the difference between persistence and stubbornness in your eyes? I would say the difference is the scope. So persistence is focusing on an overall goal, an overall mission, if you will. Whereas stubbornness is the refusal to accept conditions for something very specific. So, say for instance, if I absolutely positively wanted to come to Japan through studying at Temple University, no matter what, that's the only way I'm coming to Japan, that's stubbornness. But if my goal is to come to Japan, then that's persistence, because you can continue pressing on through it and you have a lot more options available to you versus being stubborn in one way that just simply isn't working. You just have to look at what is your overall goal rather than what's in front of you. Question 87. Who do you call when you're ready to quit everything? I have a couple of people I'm fortunate to say that I call when shit gets really bad. And I'm very thankful to my group of friends for keeping me in check mentally when shit hits the fan. I don't want to name anybody specifically because I don't want to call them out or anything. I don't know how comfortable they are with me mentioning them online, but you definitely know who you are. So if you are watching, hi. Question 88. How has Japan life improved your mental health compared to Ohio life? Well, it's just shit makes a lot more sense out here. The overall quality of life is much better in Japan than it was in Ohio. I can actually afford healthcare out here, which is pretty nice. I can get dental work that's not going to cause me to take out a huge financial loan. That's nice. Having good quality housing for not a whole lot of money in a nice neighborhood, that's pretty nice, you know? So there's a lot of things. It's not any one major thing that makes, in my mind, in my eyes, Japan life better than Ohio life. It's just a combination of a lot of little things, really. Question 89. What is your Zen activity that has nothing to do with screens? Well, that's easy. Going out for walks. especially by the beach, you know? That's a wonderful way to release some stress, just looking at the water, at the waves, listening to them, breathing in that good-ass prana, and just recognizing where I am, just feeling grateful and appreciative that I get to be so close to such wonderful nature. Question 90. If you could delete one bad year from your life, would you, or do you need it for the story? As tempting as it would be to skip over a year in my life, I do feel like overall it is needed for the story. You know, because otherwise, you know, the victory would be a little more hollow. After going through all the trials and tribulations and finally reaching my goal, that's what makes the accomplishment that much sweeter. So as tempting as it would be to delete one bad year or many bad years from my life, for being real here, I wouldn't do it. It's needed for the overall story. And now moving on to Era 9, the last era in this video, the legacy and the future. Question 91. What is the one video that you want played at your 50th anniversary? Oh, Jesus. I just got to my 20th, and now we're talking about 50th? My God. Probably would be like some of my very early videos, like probably my first vlog. You know, where with the San Diego acting, not the test vlog. Yeah, just seeing me at my folks' old place. My little San Diego acting camera, you know, bitchin', you know, stuff like that. And it's just really great for the money. You know, all this kind of weirdness, and I'm just like, oh, Jesus. You know? But yeah, that would probably be the one, is vlog 1. Question 92. If you could collab with any new gen J-vlogger, who's doing it right? There's a lot of like new gen J-vloggers that I've been watching that aren't exactly like super popular or anything. Gosh, as far as like who I'd collab with, I'd love to collaborate with Robin from Nomad Push. I actually went to his first offline get-together where I met a lot of his other fans who actually came over to Japan to meet him. And I was fortunate enough to be the plus one for Eric to be able to meet Robin and his merry gang as well. And I had a lot of fun, actually. So it would be nice to collaborate with him. There's another channel called Inaka Vibes. Would love to get a tour of their little island as well. That'd be a lot of fun. Gosh, so many, man. So many. Cheney from Cheney in Japan. She does a lot of good things out in Wakayama in the Kansai area. Would love to meet up and have a chat with her as well. Those are just a few. If I had a chance to list more, I'd list more, but we're already here for a long time as it is. So let's move on. Question 93. What happened to the Andy Cade spirit? Does the gamer still live inside the editor? Long story short, no. What happened to the Andy Cade channel? As I mentioned way earlier in this video, the channel was suddenly and inexplicably deleted from YouTube. One day I tried logging in and the channel and everything else was gone. I was like, oh, shit. Didn't get an email or nothing. So I was like, okay, I guess we'll move on to something else then. So that's just kind of how it is. But as far as gaming goes, I just do like super duper casual type shit. Just, you know, mobile gaming here and there. Nothing super serious these days. Question 94. How do you want to be remembered in the J-Vlog community? That's a good question, man. I've been a part of the J-Vlog community pretty much since its inception, even though I wasn't actively contributing videos to it until I actually came out to Japan in 2013. But as far as how I want to be remembered in the J-Vlog community, it's just, you know, someone who is just an honest dude, you know, just talking about my own experiences in Japan, not trying to start any shit with anybody, but somehow, you know, getting into some trouble here and there, but just overall, nice, honest dude, I guess. Question 95. What is the most meaningful comment you've ever received in the boopity-boops? In the comments down below. I've received tons over the years and decades, I can now say. Plural. Probably some of the most meaningful comments are the ones that say, that I've changed their lives in some way for the people watching my videos. I've had people send me comments, send me emails even, and private messages elsewhere telling me that I've changed their lives for the better. For instance, they didn't think they would be able to come out to Japan, but thanks to watching my videos, they were able to make it happen. I gave them the courage to go for it, basically. And that's the kind of stuff that I really, really appreciate. It's just, it kind of is one of the reasons why I do what I do. Even if I don't have like millions of subscribers or millions of views or any of that stuff, just knowing that the stuff that I do helps people in some way positively change their life, that's huge, man. It really helps keep me going and keep me making more videos. Question 96. If YouTube shuts down tomorrow, where does a life in video go? Well, hopefully it doesn't shut off tomorrow. Otherwise this video is not getting uploaded. But if YouTube did shut down unexpectedly, where would it go? Probably TikTok, to be honest. I do have a TikTok account there. I don't really post a whole heck of a lot. It's just more of me viewing stuff and me posting for shits and giggles every once in a while. You can find me in the old Tiki Tacs under Andy Japandy if you're curious. But yeah, if YouTube does shut down, I'll probably just move over to TikTok. Question 97. What is the next big goal on my board for the end of 2026? Well, for me, obviously, I'd love to get a new full-time job. That'd be huge. Once I get that, the next big goal for this year would be to move to a new place. To move to my own place out here in Chigasaki, or at least in Shonan, if I can't find a place out here in Chigasaki. So that is the big goal for myself this year, once I get a new job, is to get my own place out here. Question 98. What is the one thing you'll never change about your videos, no matter how pro you get? Just being honest with you guys. I've really felt that just being my true honest self with you guys is something I want to continue to do. Now, obviously, I can't tell you every single thing, for privacy reasons, not just for myself, but for others as well. So I can't go through every single gruesome detail, but I can at least tell as much as I possibly can to you guys about my situation, where I'm at, what I'm doing, stuff like that. So maintaining that honest authenticity on this channel and elsewhere online is something I'll continue to do. Question 99. After 20 years, are you still just getting started? In a lot of ways, yes. There's new types of content, new niches, new production techniques, a lot of new things happening that didn't even exist 20 years ago, or hell, even 5 to 10 years ago. Like a lot of this AI stuff wasn't even a thing 5 or 10 years ago, and now it's everywhere at this point. It's only going to continue to develop. So as things change, you have to get with the times, as it were, and learn to adapt and incorporate those changes into your workflow, and hopefully they can make it more positive. And now we've made it to that very special time, as my energy levels are almost completely depleted at this point. I can't even say words anymore. My mouth is so dry you can hear my tongue. Jeez Louise. But we finally arrived at question 100. I only have 2 hands. Anyway, we've arrived at question 100, the final question, the big one, the one everybody's been waiting for, and that is, Andy, after 100 questions, are we still recording? Well, let me check. I've had to empty both memory cards, and the light is still blinking. There's only 1 dot left on the battery, but I can confidently say, all right, and we're recording. Hey gang, Andy here, and welcome to the very end of this frickin' long-ass vliggity vlog of a video. My God, I didn't think I would make it to the end of this video. It's so long. But yes, we are still recording. So, with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching until the very end of this very long video. I want to say thanks to everybody who's tuned in to my videos over these past now 2 decades. And with that said, this is Andy, signing off for now, thanking you guys, boop, for tuning into this video, and others. Also want to thank you guys for liking with the thumbs or the stars for you old school followers, comment, subscribing, send a few friends to the party, and hey, as always and forever, we'll see you next time. Catch you later, guys. Bye.
Simple life and happier times, spirits of past, memories of mine. Shooting stars in the pale moonlight, morning rainbows make it all feel